How's it going? This is Dylan with Dylan Talks Tone. This is the podcast where we talk about everything guitar tone, from the pick to the amp to the air in the room, everything to do with your guitar sound, and just talk about different stuff that makes it all go. So tonight, this was actually left for us today on Facebook. A viewer from last week's podcast wants to talk about the output of pickups. This is a huge question. Many people, when they go for pickup output, quote unquote, I'm making air quotes, they look at the number. So let's say it's 8K or 9K or 10K, and then they base their pickup, decision based on that number. Well, what is the problem with doing that? It's not necessarily a problem per se, but what the thing is that what does that number mean? Because a lot of people they go basically on that. When you measure the resistance of a pickup, basically what you're doing is you're saying a wire of a given gauge, let's say it's a 42 gauge or a 43 gauge wire, has been wrapped around this coil this many times, and it has this overall resistance. Okay? And a lot of people use that reference for output because the higher that number is, all other things remaining the same, the pickup will be louder. It will be more output. But that doesn't necessarily give us an indication into its tone, what the pickup actually is going to sound like. So, why does this matter? Well, when we say a high output pickup, or a low output pickup, what are the two main factors in that? The two main components of any pickup is a magnet and a coil. The thing is that when people wrap more wire around a coil and they make it quote unquote higher output, higher resistance, that doesn't take into account the magnet type or the magnet quality. So this is another thing. This goes back to basically how pickups work and what they do in an electric guitar. So when we strike the string on the electric guitar, it disturbs the magnetic field that is happening around the pickup above it. And when it disturbs that magnetic field, it induces a voltage through the coil, and that voltage goes to the amp, and the amp does its thing. So the main factors in its tone are the strength of the magnet, because if the magnet is very strong, and the vibration of the string can have, when I say very strong, I mean it reaches farther. It can have more of an effect. So if you move the string a certain distance and there's a strong is not the right word. If the magnetic field is fully encloses the string, and when you strike that string, every little motion creates a lot of voltage, then that will affect its sound a certain way. If you take that same magnet and you put it in a coil that is very, very small, okay, low resistance, like 7K, 8K, 7K, let's say, then there's just not a whole lot of wire there to have very much inductance when we strike the string, vibrating the string, disturbing the magnetic field, and inducing a voltage in that coil, but there's just not very much coil, okay? So those are the things. The stronger the magnet or the larger the coil. Well, here's the problem. We're going to do other podcasts on this. The larger the coil, the higher the resistance. There are other factors that go into play called capacitance, for one, that make it to where some of the high frequencies start to go away as we raise the resistance of the coil. Okay? Now, the thing that also has something to do with that is the diameter of the wire. So usually a very high output pickup has a small diameter wire, many turns, and sometimes the high frequencies can start to go away and the mid-range can kind of start to suffer because those are the kind of the first things that suffer when we raise that resistance. So then what many people do is they will take a very strong magnet, say a ceramic 8 magnet, and put it in that pickup so that they can kind of try to bring some of those highs back based on the fact that they're using a really strong magnet. Has anybody ever had a ceramic magnet in their guitar and it was very razor blade sharp and very harsh sounding? That's probably because it was less winds, it was a strong magnet, and it was kind of overcome by the strength of the magnet. There's a balancing act there as far as tone is concerned. So when we talk about a low output pickup, and this was the question today, what is the main difference between a low output pickup and a high output pickup? Typically, a low output pickup, like for instance, a Dylan Pickups DAF, like a Tim Shaw, older Les Paul, or even the original PAFs, they were, I'll use Dylan Pickups DAF for an example. Alnico 3 magnet, a about 7.6K worth of resistance. And so that is a very, it's honestly a pretty small coil, and it is a very weak magnet. What is that going to give you? Well, that's going to give you tons of clarity. It's going to give you, if you're not careful and you have to design around this, it'll almost give you harsh highs. It'll give you a real strong mid-range. If you hear of very classic old, when you talk about old PAFs or very traditional PAFs, many times they will mismatch the coils by about 1 to 300 turns of wire, and that will make the mid-range a little bit more pokey. That's why those early PAFs were very pokey through the mid-range, and they really jump out at you like that. You have to be real careful because sometimes they get a little harsh if this is the case. Now, if we were to take that 7.6 coil mismatched by 1 to 300 turns and put an Alnico 5 magnet in it or a ceramic 8 magnet in it, probably would get a little harsh, get a little razor sharpy, because what we're doing is we're making it very susceptible to attack. So when we hit the string with a pick, the magnetic field gets kind of slammed because if the magnet is too strong, plus the fact that it's already a very high-endy kind of pickup. That's one of the main problems. We'll get into that in a minute. So now as we raise our output of our pickup and we put more wire on there into the, let's say, 10K range, and then we put a Alnico 5 magnet in it, then this is kind of a common range for a lot of pickups, from 9 to 10K with like an Alnico 5 magnet in it. That's kind of your run-of-the-mill humbucker that you'll see in many guitars, and that just gives you your basic humbucker tone. But the thing is as you bring that resistance higher, those highs will start to go away. And there's a lot of people that will say you get to about 10 or 11K and it starts to really fall off, really get a little bit more muddy. And this is where we get into like a less expensive guitar, because the way that they wind them is very hot, and they use a very cheap magnet, and it ends up to where your highs start to go away. They get a little bit of muddy kind of tone to them. The base plates are cheap, but they read a very high resistance. You would think that they would be very high output and that they would sound great, but it's kind of the opposite. As that number goes up, those highs start to fall off. They get a little muddy. Now, there are ways to wind a pickup so that does not happen. And in fact, we work very hard to make sure that that does not happen in our high output pickups. The thing about it is when you are, and the higher you go, I don't want to say the worse it gets, but that is kind of the thing, that the highs start to go away. The interesting thing though is you can't just go by that number, because you have to look at the rest of the pickup. So there's a couple of things you want to do. You want, when you're shopping for pickups, first of all, I would just say ask questions, first of all. And the questions I would ask are, when somebody's trying to select a high versus a low output pickup, is what are you going to use it for, obviously? And what is the most important part of the note or the frequency to you? When somebody says, when you're saying this is what I want my guitar to sound like, do you want a lot of highs? Do you want the mid range to really poke out? Do you really want, do you want a mid range scoop? Those are questions that you want to ask. And you say, well, I can just do that with my pedals, or I can do that with my amp. The thing is that it's going to make it a lot harder if you have a pickup that doesn't do it in the first place, to put something there that's not there. Because one of the things I always tell people is, the pickup by itself, with the tone knob all the way up and the volume all the way up, is as close as you're going to get to everything that pickup can do and is capable of. And the volume knob and the tone knob and the other passive circuits in the guitar, depending on what you have there, do nothing but filter out. They do not add anything in. And we're talking about in a passive situation here, not an active situation. Now, then you get to your pedals and you get to your amps. We're going to probably do a video for Dylan Talks Tone on YouTube about stacking gain stages and understanding how we can put this stuff back into it. But you always have to remember that you're going to start with your pickups. They're going to be your baseline, because that's everything that the guitar can do, okay? With the knobs all the way up, that's all it can give you. And if you've got a pickup with a very, very hot magnet and a very, very hot wind, is it going to give you the frequency range that you're looking for? The lower that you go, okay, with the number, as far as the resistance is concerned, and the magnet is concerned, it is going to give you a less loud pickup, but many times it's very, very articulate. So you can hear every little thing, every little pick scrape, every little finger movement with your left hand. They're very, very expressive. The other thing too is, since they are not, and we'll talk about gain stages in another episode, but since they are not hitting the amp very hard, they clean up real well. The higher you go with that resistance number, the harder it is for that to do that. Also, the higher in magnet strength you go, the harder it is for the pickup to clean up. Now, there are ways around that. We have a really, really high output, really, really strong magnet blade pickup that we make that is super expressive still, but still it does not clean up like a very, very low output pickup. So the difference between high and low is, what do you really want out of it? If you want something that is edgy with a lot more treble, that has less, I don't want to say dynamic range, well, I guess that is the word, then a high output pickup is for you. If you just play on 10 all the time and you want the thing to really hit your amp hard, then a higher output pickup is for you. The thing is, you're going to have to find one that does not compromise your higher frequencies and does not get so edgy that it cuts your head off with any kind of treble. If you want a lot of dynamic range, if you want the guitar to do a lot of different things, if you want to play jazz on it, blues on it, rock, you want to do a lot more dynamic things, you want to do less with pedals and more just with the volume knob on the guitar, then a lower output pickup is probably going to serve you better, because it's going to allow you to adjust in and out what you're looking for. And the overall frequency spread that is available is going to be wider. And it's also, the guitar is a mid-range instrument. It's a vocal instrument, really. It's the same thing as a voice, a person's voice. when you really look at where it sits in the frequency range. And so a lower output pickup is going to give you a lot broader mid-range. And the thing about that is that then you'll have to do less with it to make yourself heard in a full band. So that's just something to think about also. High output pickups, low output pickups. If you have any more question about this stuff, and I know this is some kind of simplistic for some people, but it's really hard to choose this stuff. And we sit down at the internet and we sit down social media and we try to Google up what we think we want to hear. And all I really want to do with this kind of little podcast is just give you more things to think about than just that resistance number. And really get away from the actual numbers and specs of the pickup and more about what you want to hear, what you want your hands to do, what you want your guitar to do, and what you're going to use it for. And then worry about selecting a pickup after that, because that's really the most important thing. And then finding somebody that can take what you're looking for and put it into an actual pickup instead of just numbers and stuff off of a shelf. That's really the thing. Anyway, my name is Dylan. This has been Dylan Talks Tone. I hope you found a lot of this helpful, and we will get back to you next week. Please check us out at Dylan Talks Tone. Subscribe if you would, and leave questions, leave comments. If there's anything you want to learn or talk about, we want to hear from you, because that is what this is all about. This topic was contributed by somebody from social media. We would love to hear from you and talk about your question next week. Again, my name is Dylan. This has been Dylan Talks Tone, and we hope you have a great night.